Hi, and welcome back to our Microsoft Excel 2013 Introduction course. In this video, we're going to go ahead and begin talking about formatting your worksheet from both the structural point of view and formatting the actual content itself. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Now, when we talk about structural formatting, we're talking about working with the rows and columns as well as the actual sheets that are in your workbook. And the first thing that we want to learn how to do is insert and delete rows and columns. Now, whenever you're inserting anything into a Microsoft document, whether it's Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, doesn't matter. Whenever you insert anything, it's always going to be inserted before whatever you select. So in the case of a column, if I wanted to insert a column in between let's say E and F, I would select column F, and that would insert the column to the left or before that column. In the case of a row, if I wanted to insert a row in between rows 6 and 7, I would highlight row 7, and that would go ahead and insert it before the row before that particular row. And again, as I mentioned in a previous video, whenever you're working with rows or columns, inserting or deleting them, you're always going to be working in the heading area, not in the actual worksheet itself. If you right-click in the worksheet itself, you will have an insert command, but it won't do the same thing, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But very simply, to insert a column, you simply right-click on the letter F or wherever you want to insert and select Insert, and you'll get a blank column. If I wanted to insert a row in between Peter and Nicholas here, I would right-click on the number 7 and then select Insert, and you'll see I get a blank row. So very easy to insert rows and columns. Deleting rows and columns works in exactly the same way. If I right-click on the letter F, you'll see I have a delete option. And if I click delete, that column is deleted. If I right-click on row 7 and hit delete, it deletes that row. And obviously, if I right-click on a column and it has information inside of it and delete it, that information is also gone. But I can always use the undo command right here to undo deleting a row or a column. So very easy to insert rows and columns. Now, if I actually right-click in the worksheet itself, I still get these insert and delete options. But when I select insert, what's going to happen is this little dialog box comes up, and it's going to ask what I want to do or how I want to insert. Now in this case, I just had one cell selected, so it's asking me, do I want to shift the cells down? Do I want to shift the cells over to the right? Or do I want to insert an entire row or an entire column? If you select entire row or entire column here, it'll do the same thing as right-clicking here and selecting insert. It'll just take a little bit more. But to show you another example of the way that inserting is going to work, I'm going to go ahead and type text 1 here, text 2, text 3, and text 4. And if I right-click on this cell right here and select Insert, and I select Shift Cells to the right, you can see a new cell has been inserted there, and the existing cells have been shifted over to the right. I'm going to undo that. And let's say I right-click on this cell right here and select Insert and select Shift Cells down. You can see how those cells are shifted down on the page. And the same thing would be true if I wanted to actually, let me undo that, delete a cell. I'm going to go ahead and type text 5 right here. If I right-click on this cell and select delete, It's going to ask me, do I want to shift the cells to the left or do I want to shift the cells up? I'm going to select up and watch what happens to text 5 here. And you'll see it moves up to fill in that position. So you have the choice of either inserting individual or groups of cells, or inserting entire rows or columns. Now let's see that second example in a little bit different way. I'm going to go ahead and highlight these 4 cells here and right click and select insert, and I'm going to select shift cells down, and you're going to notice all 4 of those cells move down. So you can not only use that insert command to insert an individual cell, but you can also do it with a group of cells. And again, I just went up to undo that option there. Now, the next thing as far as structural formatting goes that you should know how to do in an Excel workbook is how to resize your rows and columns. And again, we're going to be working in the header area up here or to the left, not actually in the sheet. And if you wish to resize your columns, what you're going to do is you're going to point at the right-hand edge of the column you wish to resize. For instance, if I want to make the commission column wider, I would point at the right-hand edge of commission, press and hold and drag over to the right. And you'll see how I'm able to make that column larger, or if I was to drag to the left, I'd be able to make it smaller. So very easy to resize columns. Now, an alternative to dragging your column, the way I was doing right here, is to use the AutoFit command. The AutoFit command. And to do that, you point in the exact same location, the right-hand edge of the column in the header area. But instead of dragging, you're going to double-click with your mouse. And when I double-click, you're going to see that that column becomes just wide enough to fit the widest entry. If I was to do that here, in B, C, and D, you'll see how those columns become narrower. You can also resize groups of columns. For example, let's say I want to resize columns B, C, and D, but I want them all to be the same width after I resize them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag across my columns. And again, I'm in the column heading here. I start by pointing at B and drag across, and that highlights the entire column. Now I can point at any one of the right-hand edges of the columns I have highlighted. In this case, I'll pick C, but you could do this with B or D. And I will drag. And you're going to notice that when I release, all of the columns that I had selected will become that same size. If I drag again, they will become even larger. If I drag it, make it smaller, you'll see that they become smaller. And that auto fit works as well. If I don't want them to all be the same size, but I want them all to auto fit, and I don't want to have to do them individually, I just double click and you'll see it makes all three, it auto fits all 3 of those columns all at once. And all of these different tricks that I've just shown you work with rows as well. I can resize my rows manually here, make them larger or smaller. I can auto fit them. I can select a group of them and make them all wider, or I can double click and they all auto fit. Everything I showed you as far as columns works with rows as well. So resizing rows and columns, again, very simple. The main thing that people get confused on with this type of formatting is, again, they try and work down here in the worksheet. They try and drag the columns from down here, and that won't work. You actually need to be up here in the header or over here in the row header area for that. Now, as far as working with multiple sheets inside of your workbook, you're going to be looking down here in the lower left-hand corner of your workbook. And you'll see right now I have sheet 1 in my workbook. The first thing you may want to do is actually give your worksheet a name. And let's say I want to name this worksheet 1Q for first quarter, or first QTR. All I have to do is double click on the name of the sheet, and then I can type first QTR and then hit enter, and the sheet now has a new name. If I wish to insert a worksheet, that's what this little plus sign here does. And if I click that, you'll see I get another worksheet, which I could name second QTR. If I wish to delete a worksheet, I just right click and select delete. Now notice that when I did that, I didn't get any kind of a warning. But if I right click on first QTR and select delete, at this point I am going to get a warning. If you try and delete a blank worksheet, a worksheet that doesn't have anything in it, it just deletes it for you. If, on the other hand, I try and delete a worksheet that does have information inside of it, it's going to bring up this warning. And it says a workbook must contain at least one visible worksheet to hide, delete, or move. So it's going to give you this little warning saying, sorry, can't do that. Let's go ahead and insert another worksheet here. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy all this information and paste it onto this worksheet here. In this case, I've got two worksheets, so it shouldn't be a problem to delete this worksheet. When I right click and select delete, it's still going to bring up a warning for me. Only it's going to be a different warning. And it's going to say you can't undo deleting sheets, and you might be removing some data. If you don't need it, click delete. So again, the important thing in here is you cannot undo this. This is one of the few things inside of Microsoft Excel that you cannot undo. So be very careful before actually deleting a worksheet that has information inside of it. And you can add as many worksheets as you want into your workbook. You can see I can just keep adding as many of them as I want. And you can also drag the sheets around. You see how I'm just dragging first QTR around, or these other sheets around. So you can change the order of the sheets very, very easily there. So inserting and deleting worksheets, very, very simple. Only thing you want to remember with that that's different from inserting rows or deleting rows and columns is that while you can undo deleting a row or a column, you cannot undo deleting an entire worksheet. So those are the essential skills that you need for formatting your actual work, the structure of your actual workbook or worksheets. Now, as far as formatting the content of your worksheet, that's also very simple. And if you're familiar with Microsoft Word, a lot of this is going to be very familiar to you. I'm on the Home tab here in my ribbon, and you'll see I've got a font section and an alignment section. And I'm going to go ahead and make these columns just a little bit wider so that we can play around with them. Actually, I'm going to highlight all of these columns and resize one, and that'll make them all the same size. There we go. So I can click on this cell and I can change the font. I could change the font size. These two buttons here you may not be familiar with. They bump the font size up a little bit or down a little bit, depending on what your needs are. I can, make things bold or italic or bold and italic. Underline. I can change the font size here. I can change the alignment of my items. For instance, I can align everything to the left, center everything, align everything to the right. This is the vertical alignment right up here, which again may be a little bit new to you since Microsoft Word doesn't really have anything equivalent unless you're working with tables. If I make my rows wider, you're going to see by default everything is aligned to the bottom of the cell. But I can align them in the middle of the cell or to the top of the cell if I want. So that's your vertical alignment there. You can also change the orientation of your text. For example, I could highlight these three cells here, and you'll see this little orientation button here. If I just click it, it's going to give me some options here to angle the items or to swap them around, change it to vertical text, rotate the text up like that. So lots of different ways that you can work with these options here. And again, you can do that to any cell you want at all. You also have an option here for wrap text. If I have a cell that has a lot of information in it, I'm going to go ahead and type some information into this cell. So now I've got a lot of information in that cell. I'm actually going to left align it here so we can see it. If I select wrap text, it's going to wrap that text so it all fits into a single cell, and it's going to change the height of that cell. If I click wrap text again, it returns to normal so that the text is now just spilling over into the next cells. We also have an option here for what's called merge and center. Merge and center. And let's say I want this title, sales figures for first quarter, to be centered across my entire table. What I would do is I would highlight that range that I want to center this text across. And then I would click merge and center. And you're going to see it merged those cells and made these 9 cells into one cell, and it now centered the text over that. If I click this drop down arrow here, you've got a couple of other options that aren't really related to what we're doing right now, but if you want to undo what you did there, undo the merge, I can click unmerge cells right here. You're going to see that's still cut off because the alignment is still centered. If I click align left, that goes back into that position. You also have some options here for number formatting. So if I was to select my numbers here, first thing I'll point out to you is we have increase and decrease decimal places right here. So I can click increase decimal or decrease decimal and work with that. I can also affect the number style. I can make it a currency value. I'll undo that. I could just put commas in if I wanted to. And putting this comma style in also adds a couple of decimal places that you can either remove or keep depending on how you want that to look. And we don't have any percentages here, but if I was to type in, let's say 0.1, it's going to round that off because I decreased my decimal places. But if I increase my decimal places, you'll see the actual decimal. And if I click on the percent sign here, it will convert that decimal number into a percentage for me. And you have some additional formatting options right up here that you can use if you're formatting dates or times or things like that. If I click General, it will return my numbers back to their default. So those are some of the number formatting options that we have. And I'm just going to go ahead and highlight these right now and click the $sign to add that on there for me. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and take my decimal places off for right now. Two other options that you're going to be able to work with are the background color of your cells and adding borders to your cells. Right now, these thin gray lines are just grid lines. They actually don't print for you. But you can add borders using this option right here, and you can change the background color or the fill color of your cells right here. So I can go ahead and highlight this block of cells here, click this drop down arrow, and I can select a background color. And then I can highlight these right here, click that drop down arrow again, and select a different color for that. It remembers the last color you selected. So now at this point, if I was to highlight these cells here and click the button instead of the drop down arrow, you'll see it applies that color for me right off the back. And then if I highlight all my cells here and click this drop down, you can see there's a variety of different ways that you can put borders on your cells, including all borders here, which would create a grid for you. Or I could take those borders off of these cells here by selecting no border. Or I could highlight that row here and select bottom double border or thick bottom border. And it'll give me a different border right there. And these border options are something that you should just go in and play with. And again, remember, it depends on what you have highlighted as far as what takes effect here. So if I was to select no border here, it will remove all the borders from there. You'll also notice that it removed the bottom border from these cells here and the right hand border from there. But I can very easily come back in here and select right border, highlight that, click the drop down, select bottom border, and it'll put that back on there for me. So those are some of the things you can do as far as formatting your worksheets go. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and continue talking about formulas and functions inside of Microsoft Excel. And specifically, the formulas or the functions that we're going to talk about in the next video are the conditional functions that are inside of Excel. We're going to talk about the if function, and the sum if function, the average if function, and the count if function. And other than just the basic functions that people use every day, like sum and average, the if function is probably one of the most useful functions that you'll find in Excel. So I'll see you in the next video.